So, for today's video, we are doing more of a podcast. It's still the same thing, but you just get to sit back and listen. And today, what we're listening to is a story about Crooklyn, directed by Spike Lee, a very, very, very awesome guy who has done some unique things. And we're going to talk about how these unique things made the movie Crooklyn a bit different from other things that were made back then. And my general opinion of the movie and some specific things that we're going to touch on. Thanks, guys. Alright, so to start off, we're going to be talking about lots of the lighting that was used in the movie. And to understand, we're going to have to use some context. So, starting off in this movie, it's based in an urban, central area in the city with a large family and some very eccentric neighbors. And mainly, I think with lighting, it was mainly used to convey a feeling of certain emotion or tone. Most of the things that happened that weren't very good in that movie, like one of their neighbors being arrested for punching one of their other neighbors, happened at night. And he got arrested and he had to be sent away for a while. And everyone really hated that because it was back in the day in a black neighborhood and he knew he was going to get arrested and it just wasn't right. And after that, there was a couple more things where it was like the mother, when she came home and everyone knew that she had cancer, that was at night as well. So it seemed like when everything happened at night, things started to take a turn for the worse. But on the other side of that, in the daytime, like when they started to wake up, there was lots of times where everyone was very happy, very excited, or that they got to go to the store or play with their friends. And that was all during the day, and it seemed like that was when they were really excited. But as the day started to end, they were sad they had to stop playing with their friends or going to eat. And all that kind of impacted their emotions, and it also impacted our emotions as well. Because throughout this movie, I feel like you got to connect with all the characters on a very deep and meaningful level because you got to see how their life worked, what they did every single day, and how they did it. And in most movies, they're usually just more of characters. They represent something. And in this, they represented themselves because you were really watching them. We were just seeing how they live their life every single day. And it's different than most people. So I really appreciate that. And more on lighting and how that works. I feel like when they use different types of lighting, it made you really connect with how the characters were feeling. Like in the early parts of the day, like when they're just waking up, you got to get that kind of sense of like dawn and how like a new day was starting. And after you got to see so many days of the characters living their lives, it almost seemed like they were just, you knew what was going to happen day after day after day. And as the movie went on, you kind of started to see how that schedule started to change and started to be different, and how it started to affect the people in the movie. Like, for example, how during the summer they always used to play together. All their neighbors would come out and they would play, and all the people would play the same bingo game on a certain porch. And everything seemed to happen with a certain kind of rhythm. A rhythm that was different from most, I feel like, back then. But in this movie, that rhythm was very continuous through the movie. But it started to change as the main character went out and went to their relative's house and had to stay there for quite a while. When they came back, they had some unsettling news. This unsettling news I'm talking about is actually that the main character's mother was dying. She had been diagnosed with cancer, and the whole movie took a huge turn. Because since we already felt so connected to all these characters, felt like we knew them quite well and knew how their life had gone, you really get to feel that sense of disconnect from what their normal life is and how it had to change so much and how this really affected them because they all didn't know what to do. This was so shocking. It was shocking for the viewers as well because it was so unexpected. Because when the main character came back from being with their relatives, we thought it was going to go back to normal because we had the same kind of view as the main character. And the main character just thought, oh, I'm just going to come back and I'm just going to do my thing, you know? It's going to be like life, like normal. But that's when the movie, I feel like, started to get interesting, which is quite late in the movie, which I think was an interesting choice from Spike. But after that happened, I feel like everything was disrupted. The movie got a lot more tense. I feel like you started to see everyone start to change a little bit, started to see how stuff started to become not normal anymore. Life wasn't how it usually was. And that was really, I feel like it was really shocking. And I was genuinely sad for the main characters. I felt a lot of empathy because of that connection. And that's kind of my first pet peeve with this movie. It's like, I don't really think that the mother's death added anything. It didn't connect to anything else in the movie. There was no plot line that character being taken out. I feel like it didn't do anything. You know, I feel like the movie could have gone on in so many different directions, and it would have been so much better. And I feel like at the end of the movie, we would have felt better about like what we had just watched. And instead of being scarred or kind of like, oh my god, like what was going on there, we would have been like, oh, that was a good movie. And that's just my opinion. But I talked to people around me when we were watching that, and it seemed like they had the exact same opinion. Now, my general opinion of this movie is that most of it was very well shot. I feel like it definitely captured a day in the life kind of thing. But in my opinion, I wasn't really a huge fan of the storyline, or what I mean is the lack of storyline. There was nothing to really connect the dots from. It was kind of like you were watching the life in this kind of urban city, but you're not really like, I feel like in this case, it wasn't really eye-opening. There was nothing really new that I saw. It was kind of all things that I'd already seen before. They were laid out in a different way, sure, but I just felt like in the way that they were laid out, all these ideas and all these things, they didn't connect together. Nothing really seemed like an actual movie or a story. It just kind of seemed like seemed like a very normal day in the life that for some reason took a turn for the worse at the end of the movie. I just felt like there was no real storyline that really worked for me. I wasn't like, oh yeah, I can kind of expect this next. And it was nice that there were some unexpected parts, but the unexpectedness didn't really carry over because there was nothing to expect because there was no storyline. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I hope it does. And I feel like if the movie had a little bit more storyline, had more of a plot, I think plot's a good word to describe what it was lacking. Because if it had more of a plot and more of a place where it could be going, then it'd be more interesting to watch, and you might be kind of trying to figure out what's going on instead of just watching something that kind of makes sense. So, yeah. Another kind of critique that I have over this movie is some of the film choices that were used. I feel like most of it wasn't really too creative. It seemed kind of normal, like you were just documenting something, like I said, like a day in the life of someone in this place. But I feel like when they weren't just being kind of normal or vanilla in the shots they were using, they were really, really weird. Or they seemed quite out of place. And this was some of the things that Spike Lee was famous for, was using these kind of out of place shots that didn't really seem to make much sense, but he still put them in there anyways. And one of these is the rolling dolly shot. And I think this could be used for lots of different things that would look a whole lot better, in my opinion. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. There's lots of other people that I've talked to that are equally as confused, if not more, of why he used this. And the way it works is it's a person on a platform, a person on a rolling platform, and that platform has a camera, and the person stays stationary while the platform rolls along with the camera staying stationary. So what it looks like is there's a person just kind of floating in space and occasionally moving. This is usually sped up to show the passing of time, or to show that the person is angry or anticipating what's happening next, and they're just kind of, floating to their destination. And I can kind of get it, but it's so out of place when it's used compared to these kind of vanilla shots that are mainly being used. I feel like it's so weird, and it's kind of shocking and random, which is also kind of the theme of the movie. It was shocking and random, just randomly throughout the movie. There was random parts that I was just like, why did they choose to do that? There's no real point, So yeah, I feel like with those rolling shots, when they were added, they very rarely actually seem to make sense or seem to kind of go with the movie. There was only a couple times when I felt that they really worked. And the one time that I did see that it really worked was when the main character, she was having a nightmare that she had been forced to sniff glue, with the local glue sniffers around her house. And with that, she was actually she was having a nightmare, so it wasn't real, but she was imagining walking away while kind of high on the glue fumes, and it seemed as if she was floating, like she was tripping. And this makes sense because I've seen this been used in lots of other movies, and it really works. So I feel like then it worked fine. And then she eventually, floated up, and then the dream ended. And that scene I felt was actually pretty cool because it was just a dream. It was random, and it was used lots of random types of shots. But these random shots worked because this was just a random scene. But that random scene played into the storyline quite well. And that's why I liked it. Now that we're coming to the end of this little podcast, I would like to do a little short session, which is my overall rating of this and a recommendation for who might want to watch this. Now, if you're a huge fan of Spike Lee and who he is, and also the types of shots that he does and the types of storyline that he likes to provide in all of his movies, I would 100% recommend this movie. Now, just because I wasn't a huge fan of it doesn't mean it's a bad movie. I think that it was reasonably well put together. It does not seem like anything was really cut in its corners. It seems like it had some real soul, which I appreciated and I thought was special. It's definitely a special movie, but it's not the type of movie that I would want to watch. Now, again, doesn't mean it's bad, but it's not really for me. If you're like me and you're not a huge fan of everything that Spike Lee does in all of his movies or all the shots, yeah, this might not be for you. If you like kind of more consistent movies with consistent storylines that kind of lead you somewhere that is at least slightly expected with some moderate plot twists, yeah, this isn't for you. It's got some extreme plot twists randomly that are just random. I feel like mainly this movie was just random. Like, there was one scene where the main character walked into her brother's room and just pissed on the floor. Like, and they never even talked about it. Again, she just pissed on the floor and then walked away. Like, that's not normal. That's just random. And I want to say it added to the movie, but it didn't, because like it was a 12-second shot that just was confusing. And there was lots of these little things that I feel like were just confusing, that didn't add a lot. But you know what? That doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. It's not. I've seen so many movies that are way worse than this. So I think if you have the ability to watch it, you know what? Go for it. It's different. It's not like other movies, and that's part of why it stood out so much in that time. But if you want to watch something else, I would recommend watching something else. So thank you so much for listening. My name is Ernie, and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, or don't. I don't really care. Thank you.